The Dershow.
The one thing that makes me a little nervous being a New Yorker is that we have now two cases. Maybe we have more that we don't really focus on or don't know about. Two cases of people who came to New York to kill prominent people who represented an industry that they disapproved of. You remember the first case where this young man stalked the head of the health services company and then shot him in the back in cold blood because he was upset at the way the company handled health claims, etc. And the company was in New York, where so many companies are. And this guy now apparently killed because he came to New York to kill people at the National Football League. You know, he got on the wrong elevator and he killed somebody who had nothing to do with it. And he also, as I say, killed the security guard with the family. It's just horrible, horrible story. So what I worry about is New York becoming a kind of magnet for the kind of killers with a cause. Killers with a cause. Remember the movie Rebel Without a Cause? These are killers with a cause. Killers who focus on somebody. Now, there's no evidence that the guy who's still alive from the health shooting was mentally ill. There's no evidence of that. We don't know. We'll see. More evidence will probably come out. There is evidence that this guy from the second killing was at least had serious mental problems. We don't know what the diagnosis would have been or whether the diagnosis would have permitted a psychiatrist to make a prediction. We do know that psychiatrists historically have not been particularly good at making predictions. They tend to overpredict, sometimes underpredict. I mean, psychiatrists have an obligation under what's called the Tarasov case. If somebody comes and speaks to a psychiatrist seeking help, and the person reveals information that makes it likely that he would either kill himself or kill or seriously harm somebody else, under the Tarasov decision, the psychiatrist, psychologist as well, and other professionals would have an obligation to turn his patient in. By the way, that's not necessarily true of lawyers. If a person comes, or priests is the easiest one. If a person comes to, and this may sound awful and counterintuitive, but I know it's true because I've checked it with canon lawyers, and I've had canon lawyers come to my class and talk about this. If a penitent comes to a priest, I'm talking about a Catholic priest now because different religions have different rules. If comes to a Catholic priest and says, I want to confess in advance because I'm about to go and kill my wife, I think every priest I know would do something. But they're not supposed to. They're not supposed to turn the person in. I know what I would do if I was a priest. I would hold the guy if I was big enough and he was small enough, and I would physically constrain him and prevent him from doing it. I don't know if I would have a lawful authority if the police came in and said, "Why are you doing this?" I wouldn't be allowed to say under the rules of canon law, "Well, he just told me that he's going to kill his wife." So the Catholic priest is in the most extreme position, and there have been cases where priests have had confessions made. They haven't said anything, and the person has gone out and done some pretty awful things. The priest's allowed to say to the person, by the way, if you do kill your wife, you will be damned eternally to hell, and this will happen to you, and it'll be terrible, 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 terrible. But you can't drop a dime on him. Lawyers used to be able to say, we're not allowed to testify. We can't do it. But recently, there have been some changes in the Bar Association rules, and now if you learn information from a client that makes it likely that he will hurt somebody very seriously, kill or seriously injure, maybe you do then have permission, maybe even an obligation to turn that person in. The traditional rule for lawyers is no, you don't. The traditional rule for psychiatrists was the same, but it was changed in the Tarasov decision. And so psychiatrists, psychologists, mental health workers now have the greatest obligation to the public, priests the least obligation to the public, lawyers somewhere in between, closer to the priest than to the other side. So we have no indication that this guy indicated to anybody that he was going to do this. Obviously, if you're a lay person, the guy comes to you and says, I'm about to head to New York to kill some people. You have no obligation of secrecy. You should turn him in. In fact, under the law of some jurisdictions, maybe you have to turn him in. And other jurisdictions, remaining silent is probably permissible, but it's wrong ethically and morally. So we'll wait and see. But I suspect we're going to see legislation that expands red flag laws so as to make it harder for a guy like him to get the kind of gun he got. And by the way, although it's apparently classified for some weird reason as a pistol, obviously it's a long barrel, and it had, I don't know much about guns, but it had magazines and a capability of shooting quite a few rounds in a short period of time. So there are things that could be done in terms of guns, denying accessibility to guns. There are things that could be done, but disputed whether it should be done, about people like him being confined in institutions against their will until they are no longer a danger to themselves or others. We'll see if there's any legislation. What happens often is cases like this provoke legislation, or at least they provoke hearings and some discussion, and sometimes you get legislation, sometimes you don't. The bottom line is it's very unlikely this could have been prevented within existing law, and the tragedy is that people were killed. Could it have been prevented by greater security at the building? More difficulty in getting up elevators? These are all issues that I'm sure the security people in the building and in the city of New York will be considering. But there's no simple solution to the problem of how to prevent crimes like this without impinging on the civil liberties of people who would never be guilty of such crimes. That's what I write about in Preventive State: false positives, false negatives, how to strike the appropriate balance. And we're going to be keeping debating this issue as long as human beings are fallible, and as long as they commit crimes, and as long as others think that they can be stopped from committing crimes. So interested in having your views on this.